Hello and welcome back everyone to another pre-recorded lesson video. As you can see, we are going over Module 1, Lesson 29 and 30. We are almost to the end of Module 1, so woohoo, great job everyone for sticking with it. I know how hard virtual can be, but everyone so far has been killing it, so keep up the great work, okay? So the announcements, we are in the last week of the 9 weeks. Okay, remember, every 9 weeks is whenever grades get finalized and report cards go out. So at the end of Thursday is when it's your last day to turn in assignments and change those zeros into actual grades. And then remember, after Thursday, grades will get finalized and report cards will go out. So turn in any major assessments or daily grades that you have not turned in yet. And on Thursday in class, we're going to be doing a district test. So make sure you show up to a virtual lesson for that so that we can take the test and y'all know what the district test is going to be about. It's just going to be whatever we went through over the course of the 9 weeks, okay? And then you all do not have school on Friday and you do not have school on next Monday as well. So great job. Y'all get a 4-day week. Y'all deserved it. I know it's been a tough 9 weeks, so get your rest. But for today's lesson, it's going to be a little bit different, okay? I'm basically just going to be introducing the last major assessment grade, right? For this class, we're done with daily grades, right? That quiz that we took last week was the last daily grade for this course for these 9 weeks. There's going to be one more grade, and this is the major assessment, right? We already did the 3-week, we already did the 6-week, and sorry about that. And we already did the 3-week assessment, we already did the 6-week assessment, and we need to do the 9-week major assessment, okay? So the learning goal is we're going to identify narrative arc and descriptive and sensory language in the end of module exemplar poems. The exemplar poems is just a example of some poems that I'm going to be showing you on what you could base your writing off of and what you could base your major assessment off of, because this major assessment is a little bit different. It's not multiple choice. It is just pure writing. Okay, you are going to be writing your own poems, and we're going to be getting into that soon. So the important questions is the essential question is still the same. What is the power of storytelling? And y'all should have known this a little bit more after last week's lessons. It's basically about narrative arc and storytelling and what storytelling can do for the reader. And what's great is y'all are going to be able to tell your own stories now. So you are going to be the storyteller, and I'm going to be the reader, and you should be able to see just how powerful you can make your own story by using all the tools that I've given you throughout the 9 weeks, okay? And the focusing question is, what does it mean to be a storyteller? You should be able to answer this question as well, because you are going to be the storyteller of your own story. And remember, again, I will be the reader. So you're going to get firsthand experience with that. And then the content framing question is, how does the module text build my knowledge in narrative writing? Remember, narrative writing is what we have been going over all throughout this module, right? The crossover is the example of a narrative writing. So we're going to move on. So the end of module task, this is the last major assessment grade, right? There's going to be a lot of handouts I'm about to show y'all right now. It is going to be due on Thursday before midnight, and it is going to be the last major grade. Remember, the major grades count for 60% of your total grade. So if you do, you need to try your hardest on these, because they can absolutely kill your grade if you have a bad grade on one of them. So let me pull up the, here we go. So let me zoom in a little bit so you can see it better. So this is the end of module task. Remember, you see the question up here right now. What does it mean to be a storyteller? Remember, that is the focusing question, right? So this handout basically just goes over what the crossover told us, right? The crossover tells a story of a significant time in Josh Bell and his family's life, right? And there's a lot of different poetic types that the author used to tell that story. Josh's story only took place over a couple of months, but we got to experience some of his most significant events in his life, right? Like Josh and his twin brother having a fight over, Josh throwing the ball at his face, Josh getting suspended from the basketball team, and Chuck Bell, their father, getting sick and dying, right? The poetry of the novel conveys not only the details of these events, but also how Josh responds to it, right? His character and how it affects his identity, right? His sense of self. So we went over the crossover all throughout this module, and we saw how poetry can really help tell a story. It can help develop the character, right? So for this end of module task, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be writing, revising our own portfolio of 3 poems. And it's going to be, the portfolio is going to include 3 poems and a cover letter. I'm going to go into some of the poetic types that we could use and an example of a cover letter that you can base your own cover letter off of. And together, all 4 of those things combined, they're going to be able to tell a story about a significant time in your life, right? In the crossover, we read about a significant time in Josh Bell's life. Now you're going to write about a significant time in your life, and that's going to be the what your cover letter or what your portfolio is going to be over, okay? So what y'all are gonna do is you're gonna write for a general audience, one that already has an understanding of free verse poetry, but no familiarity with your own personal experience, right? So you're gonna consider how to draft a narrative in verse that's engaging and that could be open to a wide group of people, right? So the purpose of this task is for you to, 1, demonstrate your understanding of narrative writing by writing a series of poems within a single narrative arc, and 2, synthesize your understanding of the power of storytelling through your narrative writing and by reflecting on your writing process. So again, your portfolio should include a narrative sequence of 3 poems, right? Use of 3 distinct poetic types, a clear narrative arc. And remember, narrative arc and narrative sequence is how a story is told, right? A beginning, middle, and end with a common theme to hold them all together. So you're going to be telling a story that has a beginning, middle, and end. And you're going to be using descriptive, sensory, and figurative language. Remember, descriptive and sensory language is words that appeal to our senses, right? And figurative language, there's our metaphors, similes, hyperbole, references, things like that, okay? And you're also going to be including a cover letter. The cover letter is basically just explaining the story, relationship between form and content. Remember, form and content is what we went over in the first part of the module. Form is the structure of the story, how it's written, how it's told. Content is the actual words and the story itself. And you're going to reflect on the power of storytelling in your cover letter. And then the cover letter is usually put in the beginning. In most cases, cover letter is just explaining who you are, what you're writing about. But we're going to put it at the end after the poems. Okay? And then there should be a relationship between the form and the content in your writing, right? Between the 3 poems and the cover letter. And I'm going to show you how that works in some of the examples. But first, before the examples, I want to show you this checklist. I already gave you all these handouts in the folder, right? For today, and I'm going to put it all throughout the days for this week, so y'all already constantly have it. So this is a checklist of what I'm expecting your writing to have, right? So use 3 distinctive poetic types, provide background knowledge or background information in your cover letter, explain the relationship between poetic type and the content, right, in your cover letter. You had to respond to all parts of the prompt. I established content for my narrative. You organize your story in a narrative arc. What else? I use descriptive detail, sensory language. You have to use at least 1 to 2 examples of figurative language. So metaphor, simile, hyperbole, things like that. These are just a list of things that I'm expecting, right? So if you want to get 100, you have to check off all of these boxes, right? So if you have any questions about the checklist, just let me know. But remember, this is what I'm expecting from your writing, okay? So an example is right here. These are examples of what your portfolio should really be looking like, right? And I already provided you this as well. So this is a 1 in a million chance by Sarah Clark. This is just an example, okay? Oh, wait, let me go. There we go, okay. So the entire portfolio is called 1 in a million chance. So the first poem is Diagnosis. So remember, always look for form, structure first. As you can see, every single verse starts with time and a date, right? So we're going to read it, then I'm going to go over this poem. So Friday, October 3rd, 3:15 p.m. Mom picks me up after school. I can tell she has been crying, black rivers streaking down her face. We're both silent on the drive to the doctor's office. Friday, October 3rd, 4:45 p.m. On the way home from the doctor, we both cry. Tuesday, October 7th, 5:10 a.m. I'm so thirsty, but they don't let you. Drink anything for 12 hours before surgery. A week ago right now, I was sleeping. I was about to wake up and watch TV, eat my cereal, have a totally normal day. Today is the new normal, I think, as I get sleepy from the anesthetics. Tuesday, October 21, 7:30 a.m. I'm going back to school today. It doesn't seem real that 2 weeks ago I was on an operating table. A week before that, I didn't know any of this was real. I have a big angry scar, like the world's ugliest necklace, hiding underneath my scarf. I guess this is the new normal, even if nothing really feels normal anymore. So that was the first poem in the portfolio diagnosis. As you can see, this is an example of a timestamp poem. We didn't go over a timestamp poem in class, but there are examples of timestamp poems in the book. Whenever his mom was texting Josh, right, giving him updates about their dad, that was an example of a timestamp poem. Okay? So as you can see in this one, it's just timestamp poem is giving you updates throughout specific times and dates about what the author is going through, right? They just went through surgery and they just went back to school, right? That this is the new normal. So the next one is report card. English, A+. Math, A-. Social studies, A. Science, A. Sarah missed 2 weeks of school this semester due to surgery. She's a quiet student. She hasn't talked about her illness, and she hasn't missed a beat. So this poem is an example of a found materials poem. Remember, a found materials poem, we've gone over multiple times, is where you get a source, right? And you take some lines from that source, some words, and you reframe it into the form of a poem, right? So this one, they took, the author took, words or the text from a report card, and they translated it over to a poem, right? It's basically just her report card and the feedback on her report card, right? So as you can see, we're going to move on to the last one, and we're going to go over the entire poem as a whole, okay? Let me tell you how I got this scar. I got in a fight with a tiger, a dragon, and a really mean cat. I went skydiving and got hit by lightning. I got into a knife fight with pirates and won. I can't tell you where I hit the gold, though. I sang in an opera and hit the high C note. It's just a cool trend. I'm ahead of the curve. I have magic powers, like Harry Potter. Scar? What scar? I think you must be seeing things. Actually, I had cancer and I beat it. And no, I'm not contagious. And yes, I'll have this scar forever. And yes, I am okay. Thanks for asking. So let me tell you how I got this scar. It's an example of an occasional poem, right? And I introduced an occasional poem to y'all yesterday or last week. Occasional poem is basically, the title is usually about what they're referencing to. For this one, so let me tell you how I got the scar. And the poem is in response to that question or that statement. So the author is basically just saying, like, these are the reasons, let me tell you how I got the scar. And they go into reasons of how I got that scar. And at the end, she finally says, hey, I had cancer and I beat it. So he's basically just listing off reasons, right? Really similar to a list poem, but they had their differences, and we went over it last week. So if you still need help with an occasional poem, look through the lessons of last week, and you will be able to catch up, okay? So these were the 3 poems that this author decided to use and write for their portfolio, right? And great, they have 3 different poetic types, right? Timestamp poem right here in diagnosis, found materials poem and report card, and a occasional poem, and let me tell you how I got this scar. It's great. They give you a narrative arc, right? It gives you a beginning, middle, and an end. So the first poem, the timestamp one, it gives you the beginning. It establishes what the character is going through in the beginnings of when they first had cancer, right? Then in the second poem, in the middle, it shows you that the character is overcoming missing school and everything. Like, she didn't miss a beat, right? Look at those grades. She's having great grades. She's overcoming the conflict of having cancer and missing school from it. And in the end, they wrap it up really nicely with a nice ending of saying, hey, I'm okay with having this scar, right? I'm okay. I beat cancer. I'm not contagious. I'm going to have this scar forever, and I'm okay with it. right? So thank you for asking. Thank you for asking me, how I got this scar, right? They're accepted it. They know they're going to be fine, right? So we have a narrative arc right there, and we have a single theme, right? The theme is don't let anything really bring you down, in my opinion. Fight through your adversities, things like that. So as you can see the structure of it. You can see the different poetic types, and then you can see the very great language that they use, very descriptive, and the figurative language. So it says, I can tell she has been crying, black rivers streaking down her face. That's the use of a metaphor. It's talking about how the mom was crying, and the makeup, right? It's her mascara is running down her face, right? It's creating like a black river, right? What else? I have a big angry scar like the world's ugliest necklace, right? Again, that's a simile right there. He's comparing the scar to the world's ugliest necklace. You could easily picture in your head, the scar going around her neck, right? And having like a necklace shape. Okay. Another one is the last poem. All of this is basically hyperbole, right? She's over exaggerating some of the reasons of how she got her scar. Another one is a great simile or an illusion is I have magic powers like Harry Potter is a simile, and it alludes to Harry Potter, right? It's both. So as you can see, there's a lot of great figurative sensory language words in there. And it's very descriptive. It helps paint a picture in your mind, right? And great uses of figurative language and combining with sensory language words to really help the reader create a picture in their mind while they're reading. So hopefully you're seeing what I'm sort of expecting from you in your end of module task or in your portfolio in your own writing. This is a great example. You can take some of this into your own writing and make sure your portfolio sort of looks like this. Okay. So the next is I want to give you an example of the cover letter. So this is what the same author wrote. As you see the title right here, A 1 in a Million Chance by Sarah Clark. So the cover letter. The fall after I turned 14, my doctor found a lump on my throat. At first, they thought it was just nothing, but they decided to check for thyroid cancer anyway. They told me there was only a 1 in a million chance that it was, but it turned out I was that 1 in a million. I was diagnosed, had surgery, and went back to school all in less than a month. In this series of poems, A 1 in a Million Chance, I explained the experience of going back to school after my surgery, feeling like the world was moving fast and slow at the same time, and realizing that I am capable of overcoming really difficult experiences. My first poem, Diagnosis, is a timestamp poem. I chose a timestamp structure because it allowed me to show exactly how quickly everything happened from the time I was diagnosed until I was back in school. The second poem, Report Card, is a poem using found materials. This poem shows someone else's perspective on my situation, this time in my life, and it shows that even if I felt totally out of place and weird, I was actually really brave and capable of being okay after my surgery. Finally, my third poem, How I Got the Scar, is an occasional poem of all the responses I gave when people asked how I got my scar. This poem shows how humor helped me to be able to talk about what happened and helped me get back to a new normal after my experience. These poems show the narrative of my illness and recovery, and also the growth I went through as a person because of this experience. I struggled with how emotional it was for me to write and share these poems. Writing about personal issues is so difficult. Exploring the way that retelling difficult stories can help us process them, Benedict Carey explains, mental resilience relies in part on exactly this kind of autobiographical storytelling. This is particularly true in my first poem, Diagnosis, because I had to think about my reactions to this illness step by step. Ultimately, telling my story in these poems helped me to better understand my own reactions to my diagnosis, and that is a powerful way stories can shape the way we understand ourselves. Okay, so that was the example of the cover letter that the author wrote for those 3 poems that we just read. And remember, a cover letter is basically explaining what the poems are, the structure that you used, and relating the structure that you used for writing the poem into how you're telling the story and how it relates to the story, right? And how you're ultimately answering that question is, what does it mean to be a storyteller, right? And that is the focusing question, and you should answer that question in this cover letter, and you should also relate form and content and how you used and how you showed that relationship in the poems that you wrote, right? So the cover letter is basically just explaining your poems, your portfolio, right? And just explaining what structures, what poetic types you used. So the writer of this did a great job in their cover letter, right? It gives a little background into what your 3 poems are about, right? It explains why you titled your poems that, and gives a background knowledge. Then it goes into the type of poems that they use, timestamp, occasional found materials, right, and what each poem really meant. But what the author did a really great job of doing is they related the structure, right, the poetic type they used, and how it really helped in telling the story, right? So they said, I chose a timestamp poem because it allowed me to show exactly how quickly everything happened from the time I was diagnosed until I was back in school, right? And then they say the report card, the found materials, showed someone else's perspective on my situation and in the time that I was going through, right? So they're relating the poetic type they use into how they're actually telling the story. That's what I want you to do in your cover letter and your poems, right? You should be able to relate the form that you use and the content that you have in your poem, right? The poetic type to what's actually being told in the story. They should relate. They should have a relationship, right? This is a great job. And then you should also be able to answer what it means to be a storyteller, right? The writer in this discusses how writing the portfolio helped her understand her own reactions to her cancer, and the writer also acknowledged the difficult, and the emotional content of the poems that she wrote and her struggle to write them, right? Because it's really hard to write about a personal thing that you're going through, right? So that's basically what I'm expecting from your cover letter, and all of that is also found in your checklist, right? If you're able to check off all of the things on this checklist, then you will get 100. That is an incredible portfolio that you made then. Just remember, again, this is due Thursday, is your last major grade. So this is what it looks like right here. I gave a little template for y'all. First poem, you're going to write it here. Second poem, you're going to write it here. And you're going to replace these with the name of your poem, right? Third poem, cover letter, and then you're going to put your title right here, okay? And it's found right here, 9 weeks assessment. That document is this one. And I'm going to go through and just give some revisions to y'all just to see if you need help as we go along, okay? And remember, you're going to turn this Thursday before midnight. If you turn it in early and I go through and it's not right, I'm going to give it back to y'all, okay? So again, Thursday before midnight, you're going to write 3 poems and a cover letter. And review sessions, right? Review sessions is basically if you come into the office hours between Monday or I guess Tuesday through Thursday, I will help you out. I will revise it with you as we go along. I will annotate it for you and just tell you what you need to do or what you're doing great at, right? So come into the office hours if you need help during all this, if you have any questions. But if you have any questions about this lesson as a whole, remember, go to the message board, the question board, message me on Schoology or email me, right? But other than that, that is it, and I'll see you here for the next lesson, okay? Bye.